Oh, that's such a warm welcome. Thank you so much. I feel part of the family already. Thank you very much. So let me dive right in, if that's all right with you. And I want to ask you a question. Have you ever had one of those lanyards placed around your neck which says access all area? You know, they call them backstage passes. You get to go places where no one else is allowed to go. You know, maybe you've been to a concert and somehow you've got a backstage pass and you can go sit with the band. You can go in the green room and hang out in places that no one else can go to. You can go through doors and go, access all areas, let me in, kind of thing. You know, it's fantastic. You're allowed in. Maybe you stood on the side of a theatre show and watched the play from the wings, and it's all very exciting. Quite a few years ago now, I was asked to speak at the carol. I've got to be careful what I say here. The carol service for Newcastle United for the first team and the reserves. Which was great. It was so exciting to be able to do that. It was the time when Kevin Keegan was the gaffer, so it's quite a long time ago. But I got an access all area pass. So not only did I get to speak to do the carol service, but I got to go into the changing rooms, got to go in the boardroom, I got to go in all the places where people can't normally go, and it's brilliant. You feel like a really important person. Listen, I want you to pretend that you've got an access all area pass on you today. I'm giving you a backstage pass to this thing called church. We're going to spend a bit of time together figuring out what is the reason for this thing we're sitting in today. You're going to see some stuff that maybe doesn't normally get shown on a Sunday morning. And I'm going to talk through with you what this place is all about and could be all about. So you've got this free backstage pass, and I'm really glad about it. But in order for me to spend some time talking to you about this thing called church, I'm going to have to invite a Hollywood A-lister to help set the scene for me. I'm going to take you back to the early 1990s and one of my favourite film franchises, the Men in Black series. Will Smith. Take a look at this.
Get to Queens?
Wait a minute, you taking a tunnel?
You know a better way to get to Queens?
Man, that thing's gonna be packed.
You remember the little red button?
Yeah?
Push the little red button. And you may want to put on a seatbelt.
Hey.
Push the little red button, and you may want to put on your seatbelt, because when you push the little red button, adventure happens. When you push the little red button, that's when you start to scream. That's when everything changes. But you're going to have to strap yourself in, because it's quite an adventure. I think for all of us, life is full of those little red button moments. You push them and everything seems to change. And it always turns out to be a bit of a roller coaster, right? It always turns out to be one of those times when you have to strap yourself in because it just feels like an adventure. Maybe, I don't know, maybe for you, you pushed that little red button and everything changed the day you decided to quit your job. Enough is enough. I'm fed up with the bickering at work. I'm fed up with the work they're asking me to do. Enough is enough already. And you pushed the little red button and everything changed. Maybe you pushed that little red button to end a toxic relationship. Maybe with your neighbours, or maybe with some friends, or maybe with a girlfriend or a boyfriend, and it's like, I'm done with all this. I'm done with all this. Maybe you push that little red button and everything changes the day you decided to start your own business. I'm going to be in charge of my own destiny now, and you push that button and everything changed. Maybe the little red button was pushed and everything changed the day you decided to change your postcode. Don't want to live here anymore. Live in a different town. Live in a different city. Hey, I might even go and move and live in a different country. Some of you have done that. A whole brand new culture. You've pushed the little red button and everything seems to have changed. And you've had to strap yourself in because it's been one heck of an adventure. Maybe for some of you sat here, maybe just recently you've pushed that little red button to say, I'm going to become a Jesus follower. I've not even thought about God the whole of my life. I've kind of wandered on by, seeing churches in the distance, not even thinking about it, and something has grabbed my attention. And I said, all right, I'll go for this. And you've pushed the red button, not knowing what the adventure's all about. And all of a sudden, you've become a Jesus follower. And you've had to strap yourself in because, man alive, it's been amazing. The journey's been a roller coaster. Here's the thing about little red buttons. When they get pushed, adventure always follows. I don't think any of us want to go through life without pushing a little red button. It's why movies are so popular. If there were no little red button moments in a movie, you'd never go and see it, right? You know, what can you imagine a Hollywood movie where he falls in love with her and they get married and they buy a little house in Carlisle and he buys a Volvo and the final scene in the movie is him driving off to work in a Volvo. Like, how boring is that? Where's the little red button? Where's the adventure? Where's Will Smith going, oh, I don't know what's going to happen next? I'm glad I've got my seatbelt on. We don't want to see it in the movies, and we don't want that to happen in real life. I think if we're honest, nobody wants to go through their life without some of those heart-thumping, heart-pounding moments where you've pushed the little red button and everything seems to change. So I want to ask you to imagine there was a little red button here on the stage, right here, right now. I want you to imagine there was a red button there. And if you were to wander up and push it, it would change everything about your life. Everything. Would you push it? Or would you walk away? What if you pushed it and it would transform everything about your faith if you're a Jesus follower? You know, maybe your faith has gone a bit dry and it's become a bit more of a duty more than a joy. It's not a relationship that's fun anymore. And if you push that red button, all of a sudden you would feel so close to heaven that the hairs would go up on the back of your neck. Would you push that little red button there? Or, and this is where I want to spend some time with the backstage pass this morning, what if you were to push that little red button and it would change everything about this church? You'd have to strap yourself in because adventure was coming, but would you push it? Or would you say, no, I like to keep things just as they are. I don't want us to grow any bigger. I don't want us to change. I don't want us to swap things around. Let's just leave it as it is because it's fine already. Look, there's a couple hundred people here. It's fine. We're doing okay. We've had one service this morning, got another one now. The church is fine. Let's not push the red button. Let's keep things as they are. What would you do? What would you do? Here's why this conversation, why I'm having it with you this morning, is so important. Here's why. Because if you were to do what I did yesterday, if you were to turn up at Heathrow Airport, because I got a little plane from Heathrow up to Newcastle and then drove here. If you were to get to Heathrow Airport and you stood in a terminal building and you looked out of those big glass windows and you went, been here half an hour now. I've not seen one plane land or one plane take off. If you were to stand at the busiest airport in Europe and look out the window and there were no planes, you'd say to yourself, there's a problem at Heathrow Airport. Or if you were to go over the road to Carlisle Central and you were to stand on the platform and look out at the railway lines and there were no trains arriving in Carlisle and there were no trains departing Carlisle, you'd think, hang on, I'm at a railway station and there are no trains coming and no trains going. You would stand there and you'd say, there's a problem. So why is it that Christians can be in church year after year after year and never see visitors come to church? Never hear stories of life change. Never watch adults who've been completely turned upside down by Jesus get baptized and tell their story. And yet not stand there and say, I think there might be a problem here. I think not just this church, I think the church in our nation needs to push a red button. It needs a red button moment because the church in this country is in decline. We're not growing. We're not growing. Max Dupre is one of my favourite authors, and Dupre says this. He says, in the end, it's important to remember that we cannot become what we need to be by remaining what we are. We cannot become what we need to be by remaining what we are. We can't keep things as they are and become the kind of church that we want to be. We can't become the kind of church that has a fantastic reputation in the community. So the community look at your church and go, I don't believe all this Jesus mumbo jumbo. I don't think I ever want to go in their building. But I'll tell you what, I'm so glad they're here because they make such a difference to our city. You can't become the kind of church that has that great reputation. You can't become the kind of church that produces such engaging services. People come and they say to themselves, really? I've got to wait a whole 7 days till I can come back again. It's so alive. I want to bring my friends, not just one or two, loads of them. You can't become that kind of church by staying what you are. You can't become the kind of church that prioritizes the next generation. You can't become the kind of church that helps people discover their talents and discover their gifts and starts putting them into practice, serving the community. You can't become the kind of church that puts people into life-giving relationships by remaining what you are. In other words, if nothing changes around here, nothing changes. Nothing changes. And in my experience, churches that are ready to change, to coin a phrase, go further faster than churches that are resistant to change. In my experience, when I get to speak in churches all around the world, to be honest, churches that are ready to change, ready to embrace doing things differently, will go further and will go faster and will make progress than churches that are resistant to change. One church leader put it on a list, a guy called Craig Groeschel. He said, to reach people no one's reaching, we're going to have to do some things that no one's doing. So profound. To reach people no one else is reaching, going to have to do some stuff, push some red buttons, do some things that no one else is doing. Now, I've been to Google University, and I've been to Google University on your behalf. Did you know, according to the last census, there are 110,000 people living in and around Carlisle? 110,000 people. If you believe the statistics about how many go to church in our country, that means there are probably around 6,000 people in and around Carlisle that would call themselves Christians, that would go to church. And that's maybe being generous. Around 6,000 people. To reach the 104,000 people that no one else is reaching, Carlisle, Elim, you're going to have to do a few things that no one else is doing. You're going to have to do some stuff that the Anglican Church isn't doing. You have to do some stuff that the Vineyard Church or the Methodist Church aren't doing. You have to do some things that no one else is doing to reach the 104,000 people living, within shooting distance of this place. You're going to have to push the red button and do exactly what Will Smith did. You're going to have to fasten your seatbelt because it's going to be quite an adventure. So I want to spend some time today with this backstage pass that you have. I want to talk about what happens to a church that decides to push the red button, and what happens to a church that says, no, we're going to keep things as they are, we're not going to push the red button. So let's dive into the first one. What does a church that pushes the red button actually look like? I want to take you back a couple of thousand years to God's initial design for this thing called church. This is access all areas for you. You're going to get back to see how God's plans for the church were in the first place. If you've been around church any length of time, you'll know these words. They're so famous. Acts chapter 2, a doctor called Luke wrote about how the early church started. And he says this, they, talking about the early Jesus followers, they devoted themselves to the teaching of the apostles, the life together, the common meal and the prayers. Just a little sidebar note here. Whose job is it to grow you up spiritually? Oh, that would be Pastor David's job. He's the preacher around here. That would be the other staff member's job. That would be the worship leader's job. That would be my small group leader's job. That's the job of the church to grow me up spiritually. No. Whose job is it to grow you up spiritually? It's your job. You have to take responsibility for it. Look at this early church. Who did the devoting to those spiritual disciplines? They devoted themselves. They took it upon themselves to say, I can't blame anybody else if I'm struggling spiritually. I need to take responsibility for my own spiritual growth. And look at the result. Everyone around was in awe. The community around looked at this new community, and it was like Pluto on those Disney cartoons when the jaw comes out and it hits the dusty floor. But people were looking at the church going, I can't believe what I'm seeing. It's amazing. Because look what was happening. Everyone was in awe. All the wonders and signs done through the apostles. And all the believers lived in a wonderful harmony. They held everything in common. They sold whatever they owned and pooled their resources so that each person's need was met. They followed the daily discipline of worship in the temple, followed by meals at home. And people liked what they saw. I love how the Bible is so understated. People liked what they saw. They went mad for it. The people out there had never seen what was going on in here. They went mad for it. So mad. Look, every day their number grew. Every day God added those who were being saved. I don't know about you, but you look at a church like that. Do you look at that and you go, God, I want to be part of that? Because the world had never, ever seen anything like this. You know, the Holy Spirit fell on a group of ordinary women and ordinary men and ordinary young people. And all of a sudden, when the Holy Spirit fell, all the old barriers that separated people had gone. All the barriers that separated people out there in the community, they disappeared. You know, people lived together like one big family over racial divides, over gender divides. It wasn't about the colour of your skin. It wasn't about your ethnic background. It wasn't about the fact that you were man or woman. It says that in the church there was no Jew or Gentile. There was no male or female. It says there was no slave or free. Can you imagine that in the church? Out there in the big wide world, there were masters and slaves. And in the big wide world, the master would say, "Hey, slave, wash my shoes." And the slave would say, "Yes, yes, wherever you stay." Get into church, those titles had gone. Quite possibly in the church, you had the slave who was heading up a serving team, and the master was on the team. And so the slave was saying to the master, "Hey, we need to do this. Come on, you need to get on and do it." And the master would be saying, "Yes, whatever you say, sir." Do you see, it was so different to the community out there, and people looked at it and said, "I want to be part of that action." Everyone discovered they had gifts and talents that were given by God, and they started putting them into practice and serving each other. And those who had money got freed up from the hold it had on them. And they started to say, "Hey, I've got this extra bit of stuff. I could sell it, and I could give you the money because you're struggling right now. I'll sell some stuff so that it will help you." And it says that they ate meals together. And one version says people ate meals together with sincere hearts. There was an authenticity about their relationships. It wasn't just a kind of superficial relationship where you said, "Isn't the weather been rough lately? And did you see the football results last night?" They got deep with each other. The masks came off. And people out there saw that and thought, "I want that kind of authenticity in my life." This was a community so remarkable, it literally changed the world. Everybody who saw it said, "I want to be part of that." God added daily to the number those that were being saved. And I read that Acts chapter 2 story and I think to myself, God, could a church like that ever exist in our country again? Could a church like that ever exist in the city of Carlisle? I want to be part of an Acts 2:42 church. You know, the start of those verses where everyone devoted themselves to the spiritual disciplines and everyone sold stuff that they had so no one was in need. There was an intense community. I want to be part of an Acts 2:42 church that was experiencing Acts 2:47 results, where God was adding daily to their numbers. The church was growing by at least 365 people a year because God was adding daily to their numbers. Imagine this place that was growing by 365 people every year, at least. You're going to push the red button for a church like that? Would you, honestly, push a red button for a church like that? Would you strap yourself in and go on an adventure for a church like that? So what happens if you don't? What happens if you go, "Duncan, I can see that. I can see how the early church started. I can see the adventure you're talking about. But you know, for me, it's too much at stake. I don't think I can do that." What happens if you choose as a church, if you choose as a part of this church to say, "That's not for me, I'm not going to push the red button"? What happens if you don't? In order for me to tell you that, I'm going to have to tell you two stories. One about fishing and one about a tortoise. Let's dive into the fishing story. The story was told by a brilliant author called Max Lucado. And Lucado tells the story about how as a younger man, he was invited by some friends to go on a day's fishing. And he was so looking forward to it. He'd got up early, he'd got his tackle and his bait and his rod together. He'd packed his sandwiches and he stood outside his house waiting for his friends to come by in the car and pick him up. They were heading off to the lake. They were going to getting onto a boat and they were going to dangle their rods over the water and they were going to fish and they were going to be so excited about it. And as they headed off towards the lake, everybody was happy in the car. People were high-fiving each other and laughing and telling jokes and stories. And then someone switched the radio on. And they went, "Oh, it's my favourite song." And they wound the windows down and they started singing. And it was just a brilliant environment in the car. Because they were heading off to fish. But as they got closer to the lake, the weather started to close in. And by the time they arrived at the lake, the rain was coming down so hard, it was making a noise on the roof, and it was coming down sideways because there was a hurricane wind alongside it as well. And they arrived at the lake, and they just knew they were never going to get out there on a boat because the weather was so bad. But hope against hope, they sat there and thought maybe it'll change. And as they sat there and the hours ticked by, they started to get a bit fractious with each other. Somebody switched the radio on and said, "Oh, I love this song." And someone else says, "Oh, I hate this song. This song's horrible. Switch it off." "No, don't switch it off. It's my favourite song. It's a good song." They started to have a verbal punch up with each other. And then someone opened their sandwiches and they were egg. And it stunk the car out. And one says, "Oh, shut your sandwich box up." "No, they're my favourite egg sandwich." "Oh, egg sandwiches are horrible. They stink like you stink." What? And genuine fight going on in the car. It was just a disaster zone. And it gets to the end of the story in the book, and Max Lucado says, the point of the story is blatantly clear. When people who are called to fish don't, they end up fighting. When people who are called to fish don't, they end up fighting over trivial stuff. Fighting over egg sandwiches and the kind of music you play. Isn't that so true in church? When we've lost sight of the mission, we've lost sight of what we're supposed to do, we end up fighting about, "Oh, I don't like that song. The band's too loud. Don't like the drums. Oh, why can't we sing some of the older hymns? Why can't we sing some of the newer songs? And what about the teaching? It's so shallow. Why can't it be deep like some other preachers?" And we just moan and grizzle about the state of the coffee or the nowhere to park and the carpet. "Why, I hate this carpet. Why can't we have a different colour carpet?" Over little pernickety things, when people who are supposed to fish don't. We just end up fighting. And churches divide and split, and it gets awful. And people hate it. Max Lucado says this about this story. He says, when energy intended to be used outside is used inside, the result is explosive. Instead of casting nets, we cast stones. Instead of extending helping hands, we point accusing fingers. Instead of being fishers of the lost, we become critics of the saved. Rather than helping the hurting, we hurt the helpers. Friendly fire. Primarily, when Jesus called people to come and follow him, he said, here's the mission. The mission is we're going to become fishers of men and women. We're going to go save lost people. That's the mission. Jesus primarily called people to a cause, not to community. Now, oftentimes we get it so wrong. We think the whole reason for church is that we can all just be together in this nice, safe, little warm space. And Jesus says, no. The primary reason I've called you to be my follower is because we're going on mission together. We're going to fish for the lost. I've come to seek and save the lost. And I'm calling you to be like sheep amongst wolves. It's not going to be easy. You're going to push the red button, strap yourself in. It's going to be dangerous. But we're going on mission together. And do you know the beautiful thing? As they went on mission together, they discovered some of the greatest community you can imagine. Because they weren't just moaning about the colour of the carpet. They were on mission together, like a little mud-splattered army coming back together again and feeling so tight and feeling so close. So would you push the red button for a church like that, or would you say, no, I'm not prepared to do that, and end up fighting? I said I'd tell you a story about a tortoise, and this will help me to come to a conclusion. I love some of those David Attenborough, Planet, Blue Planet kind of programs. You love those too. We'd all love David Attenborough to be our granddad, wouldn't we? He does those programs where he goes under the water and you see this sort of life under the sea like you've never seen it before. Or he does those programs about birds that fly in the sky that you've never known before. He goes into the deepest, darkest jungles and looks under rocks and stones and you see little spiders and snakes and things that you've never seen before. Well, he actually did a program about common garden animals that you see in your own backyard. And one of them was about a tortoise. And at the end of the program, it was brilliant. At the end of the program, there was this beautifully, freshly mown English country garden lawn. And across the lawn, a tortoise like the one you can see on the screen behind me, a tortoise was wandering across the lawn. And David Attenborough said, a tortoise can only make progress when he starts to stick his neck out. And I thought, how profound is that, Mr. A? How profound is that? A tortoise can only move forward, only make progress, only get to the other side of the garden, only find the food and the nourishment it needs if it's prepared to stick its neck out. And I thought, you know what? I think that could be a message for the church. Hey, listen, church, you could stay cozy, comfy in your shell if you want to. And you'll get to heaven one day and God will say, well done, good and faithful servant. But if you really want to make progress, if you really want to make a difference in this world, if you want to feel like your faith is alive, then you're going to have to stick your neck out. You have to do some things that no one else is doing. You're going to have to push the little red button. Maybe it's time for you to serve in this place in a way you've never served before. Maybe it's time for you to stick your neck out and give sacrificially, not just loose change from your pocket in a way you've never given before. Maybe it's time for you to get on your knees on a regular basis and pray for this place and pray for the mission of the church in a way you've never prayed before. Maybe it's time for you to start taking some courage and inviting your friends to come with you in a way you never have done before. Maybe it's time for you as a church to make some radical changes, some red button kind of changes, so that everything changes and you know you're going to have to strap yourself in because it's going to feel like a real adventure. So what are you going to do? The red button's here. Elim Church, Carlisle. The red button is here. You're going to push it, or are you going to say, do you know what? I think I just want to keep things as they are. I'm not sure I really want to go on that kind of adventure. You know, whenever I speak like this, and I do in churches all around the country, inspiring people to understand what could be in terms of the Church of Jesus Christ. When I speak like this, I get two responses from people. And I had them this morning after the first service. I chatted with some people at the end. I get two responses. I get some people, and I can hear it amongst you and see it in your eyes already. Some people who say, oh, where's the button? I want to press it now. That's the kind of church I want to be part of. I don't care how much it's going to cost me. I'm up for the adventure. I want to be sacrificial. This is the most exciting thing I've ever heard. I'm in. And I get other people who say, I get what you're saying, Duncan, but I'm scared. I'm afraid. I'm a bit nervous. I've done church in a different way for decades. And what you're describing, I see it from the Bible, but what you're describing just feels a little bit scary. I'm just not sure. I've got the courage because if I push that button, I know I'm going to have to strap myself in. I know it's going to demand from me, and I'm just not sure I'm ready for that. I just feel a little bit afraid. Listen, what if God has placed the best things for your life and the best things for this church on the other side of fear? Let's ask Will Smith to help us with this again.
Skydiving is a really interesting confront with fear. I gotta stand up. I'm sorry, I gotta stand up. You go out the night before and you take a drink with your friends and somebody says, yeah, we should go skydiving tomorrow. And you go, yeah, we'll go skydiving tomorrow. Yeah. And you go, yeah. And everybody goes, yeah. And you go home you by yourself, you're like, Right? You're like, well, I mean, they was drunk too. So then that night you're laying in your bed and you just keep, and you're terrified. You keep imagining over and over again jumping out of an airplane and you can't figure out why you would do that. So you get there and then you have this safety brief and you're standing there and the guys would say, well, if the chute doesn't open, what's going to happen is you're doing, well, why the hell, what could happen? So you get onto the airplane and you're sitting there and you know, it's extra because you're sitting on some dude's lap, some stranger, trying to make small talk. Yeah, man. So you be jumping with people all the time, huh? So you fly and you go up to 14,000 feet and somebody opens the door. And in that moment, you realize you've never been in a freaking airplane with the door open. Terror, 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 terror. And then people start going out of the airplane. And the guy walks you up to the end of the thing, and you're standing and your toes are on the edge and you're looking out down to death. They say on 3. 1, 2, and he pushes you on 2 because people grab on 3. And you fall out of the airplane, and in 1 second, you realize that it's the most blissful experience of your life. You're flying. There's zero fear. You realize that the point of maximum danger is the point of minimum fear. The lesson for me was, why were you scared in your bed the night before? What do you need that fear for? Everything up to the stepping out, there's actually no reason to be scared. And then in that moment, all of a sudden, where you should be terrified is the most blissful experience of your life. And God placed the best things in life on the other side of fear.
You are a little bit afraid. And God is saying to you this morning, God has placed the best things. I've placed the best things for your church, for your life, on the other side of that bit of anxiety you're feeling, that bit of nervousness that you're feeling. That's where the adventure is. Sure, you're going to have to strap yourself in, but that's where the adventure is. Let me pray. Father, the big truth here is that, yeah, we do feel like our knees are knocking, because it does feel like we're standing on the edge, and it does feel like someone's opened the door and the air is rushing in and the adventure is ahead of us, and we are a bit scared, Father. But the truth is, you are strapped to us. You are not pushing us out on our own. You promise to always be with us every step of the way. So it might be scary putting our seatbelt on and pushing a red button, but you're with us. You're cheering us on. You're strapped to us. You're that close. We're not alone in this adventure. So I pray you would give us the courage as individuals to step up and to jump out, to invite people in a way we've never invited before, to give, to serve, to offer to help, to be involved, to get excited, knowing that you're with us every step of the way. So, Father, I ask you now to fill us with the power of your Holy Spirit to do the things you're calling us to do. I don't know, maybe, Lord, for some of us in the room, we're sitting here and we're saying, I thought Christianity was about a Sunday school picnic. I didn't know following Jesus was like jumping out of a plane. Hey, this is the adventure my life has been looking for. Count me in. I want to be a Jesus follower too. I pray you would give those of us thinking like that right now the courage to jump into your arms and say, God, I want to become a follower of yours. And so, Father, I pray right now you would give us all we need to take our best next step into the future you've promised us. And everybody agreed and said, amen. Amen. David.
Amen. Thank you so much, Duncan. I said in the first service, I'll say it again, that I was sitting and all I could think was the red buttons on Britain's Got Talent. And I went past the red button, I went straight for the big gold button. And I was hitting it the whole way through the first service, I was hitting it the whole way through the second service. You know, this last year, we've looked at how Jesus lived, how Jesus loved, and how Jesus gave of himself. And I really believe that this is so timely to what has been said today. I had no idea. I knew that Duncan was coming, Duncan and Jim were coming to talk about the Further Faster Network, and especially in the afternoon time. I had no idea what Duncan was going to talk about this morning at all. And just even after last week, I think that last week, what I said at the AFM, people will have went away and they'll have thought lots about what we were talking about on the vision and what we're looking for to do in the church going forward. And I got to be honest with you, we are right on the cusp of maybe a couple of red button moments. We need to step forward without fear and hit the red button for what was said last week, but also for us to become the church that we have started to become, because I know that last year we became a church that started to invite people to church. We need to remain and continue to be a church that unchurched people love to attend, and that's what we want to do. We want to become more like that. And I know you as a church group of people that I know individually and collectively, I know your hearts, and I know this is what we want to see. We want to see Carlisle won for Jesus. So guys, let's really, really think about this. And it's time for us all to collectively hit a big red button and step into the future, which is going to be amazing because of what God has ahead of us.